Andy has recently started a cover crop sales and application business. He does custom hire with a high clearance cover crop seeder and matches customers with other modes of application. So let's give Andy a warm welcome.
All right, thanks. I'm going to say some of the same things that Rick said. And what I really appreciate what he said this morning already is that, yes, he's not from around here, but there's still bits and pieces that you can pick up from what he's doing. Hopefully you get something out of what I'm doing too, because I've been going to conferences like this, listening to people from out of state, and there's always something that you can take away from them, even if it's not exactly what they're doing on their farm. So my family and farm, like she said, I'm farming with my dad, Don. We're running 950 acres between the two of us. We each have our own land, so if we really disagree on something, we can do it our own way. But for the most part, we're all on board with the practice and doing things very similar on all our farms. We are running a 3-crop rotation, so it's corn, soybeans, and then after the soybeans is something else. It was oats primarily. Now we're dipping into the canning crops. The sweet corn and the canning peas is what we're using for 3rd crops, and that's allowing us to do some grazing, play with the cocktails, do all sorts of fun stuff after those crops are harvested. And like what Rick said, it's really important that you look at more than just the year, because I've had people ask me, why are you raising oats? You can't make money with oats. Maybe not, but what I get to do after the oats and the years going forward are what help me out. We partner up with a neighbor on equipment, so that way when it's harvest and planting time, we come together and can have the extra labor, but not have to have them all around year round, like full time. And it helps us afford the equipment that we're running on such few acres as well. Livestock on the farm includes some steers for butchering through the locker, and then with the covers and the no-till now, we're doing custom grazing. I like cattle, I don't like feedlot cattle. I hate making bedding, I hate hauling manure, and this time of the year I really hated when it snowed and I had to haul snow out of the pens. So when I can put them out in the field where they eat and poop out there, and I don't make bedding, and all I have to do is make sure they got food and water, that's fun. I can send them back on New Year's and get rid of them for the rest of the winter. And then, like she said, I'm operating a cover crop business. It started out as a Hagie, now it's a Miller, and we put a seed box on it, and we're offering that as a method of application besides the plane, because some people don't like the plane, and the plane doesn't want to go in certain areas. So where we came from, where we are, and why we started. 2014 is the last time the ripper went across the farm. From there it was a gradual accident progression to minimum tillage. We were running Salford vertical tillage for a while before ever getting into the cover crop stuff. And then once we started hearing about cover crops and going to these conferences, we decided that, hey, we want to try this too. And so, well, all right, now we can't run that vertical tiller anymore because we got something growing out there in the spring. Fast forward to 21, and everything is pretty much planted green, except for the oats, obviously. We can't plant those green. That's got to be in the bare stubble. Everything's terminated after planting, and even with some of the beans, we're waiting until they're even up. So a couple things I want to go over is the observations I see on my farm and what I see on other people's farms who are doing this kind of stuff. I want to get into some of the basics if you're kind of new to cover crop and hey, how do we start, or where do we go, what do we look at, and then even some advanced ideas, because I don't like when people want to start right out of the gate with something that's above their level when they haven't even dipped their toe in the water yet. And then I'm going to go over a little bit of proof of yield and revenue, because, you know, like we talked about, yield, yeah, it's important. Is it everything? No, it's not, because if I start cutting out costs, that makes me competitive too. So observations, wildlife. See a lot of wildlife on our farm now. That doesn't add any revenue, but it's fun, and people like hunting. So we get to see that. Erosion control is huge. We do have some grass waterways, and some of them, I don't know if they're entirely necessary anymore. And places that used to wash, don't wash. Earthworms, I find a lot of worms now. Those worms are creating holes. This picture right here is an earthworm hole with a root coming through it. So now you give your roots a spot to go and channel up and down the soil. Water infiltration, we'll touch on that a little bit. Especially in years like the last couple when it's a little drier, we want every drop of water we can get to go in the soil, not off of it. And weed control, we're cutting back on residuals. We're not using the heavy hitter programs anymore. So we're trying to save on some chemical costs and be a little more friendly to the soil. And then reducing capital and labor. We've skinnied up our line of machinery now to a planter, tractor, combine, cart, and just the bare essentials. So got rid of the big four-wheel drive, sold all the tillage equipment. So now we can really skinny up on the equipment. And soil structure gives me better field traffic ability. I don't have a problem with the running. Those wet falls that we had back in 18, 19, I'm not pulling combines out of stuck holes anymore. And with the structure, this looks really blurry. You can't see it really well since it's kind of blurry, but this top 4 inches is where we're starting to build that crumbly soil. We got a long way to go yet, but at least we're getting started. And then nutrient recycling. So this is what I'm talking about by structure. On the left is some of my neighbors' fields. They're pulling their combine out with the quad. They're making a mess trying to harvest soybeans. I don't have that issue anymore. I do have wet fields. I have some rented farms that are not tiled, and I can get through them without cutting a track, which is really helpful in those wet years. I put this picture up because this is the guy we farm with, Dale, on one of those same wet falls. He had 40 acres of corn that he pulled out of that 40 all on them 2 light colored sets of tracks with a tractor and a wagon, and never cut a track. Meanwhile, everybody else is mudding the hell out of it and dragging it up on the road. Nutrient scavenging. Rick told you about it. Here's a picture of it. So this is cereal rye in the spring after a corn harvest. And in that cornfield the year before, we had done nitrogen trials at different rates. And you can see the really single dark strip in there, that was a high rate trial. You can see kind of the striping through here, that's the replications of the different strips. So now we're bringing that nitrogen back up to the top instead of letting it go down through the water lines. What about water? I love this demonstration. And it's amazing every time. If you guys have seen the rainfall simulator, the no-till with cover crop was off my farm. The strip till was somewhere next door, and then the tillage. And you can see that back jar, how much of that water is able to percolate through that soil versus running off the top. It's fun to watch every time. It never gets old. More water. I don't know why this bottom left is even accessible. That's after snow melt in spring. Happens to the same guy in the same field every year. It's not that steep of a farm. It's just what happens when your ground is frozen, you're melting snow in the spring. Like I was talking about, kind of eliminating waterways. This is after 3 inches in 25 minutes. Usually on a farm that had tillage, you'd have that spoil running out the bottom, and we don't. And those beans actually stood back up and still make beans. And the corn stalks are there helping divert the water and hold the soil. Yields. So what I did to try to figure out if I was sacrificing something is I went to McPherson Crop Management in Janesville. They helped me with my data management, yield mapping, and all that fun stuff. And I said, hey, let's compare my farm to a pool of acres. You go through your database and you pick out people that are doing it the exact opposite I am. You know, ripping in the fall, digging in the spring, heavy input users, and let's see how we shake out. So this is how we came out. So on the average, I'm running a 190 average, they're running 195, and they're pulling from as little as 3,000 and as much as 8,000 acres to compare me against, so they're pulling a large set of acres. The blue line is where we started no-tilling and doing some strip till, or the blue arrow, I should say. So you kind of see, what I get out of this is that in 18 and 19, when we had later springs, wetter springs, we can hang in there with them. Where I'm screwing up in 20 and 21 is I'm trying to go out planting at the end of April, 1st of May. And that's a mistake because it's hurting my corn stand. So what we're gonna do going forward now is work on planting all the beans and then delaying the corn till sometime when we know we got better weather coming and warmer weather, because this 3 weeks of wearing your winter jacket in May is not helping me do no-till corn. So then I said, all right, let's put that yields to revenue, because I'm not doing fungicide anymore, spraying it on the corn and beans. We've cut fertility way back. We still use nitrogen, very little P and K, saving all the tillage passes and all those expenses. So when I took their yields and my yields, multiplied it by the average price that year that was on the Board of Trade, subtract off what we're each doing, and I did subtract from my revenue the cost of the cover crop. That's a real cost, and that's what we come up with. So like I said, you can see in the years and them early springs where we fall behind a little bit, but really, I don't know if you could even say we're behind, because up on the top there, those numbers, the left number is the whole average of the graph, the right number is just the no-till, or since we started adopting these practices average. $25 an acre difference, yeah, it's something, but that's across a large scale of acres. And I don't have side-by-sides on this kind of thing to tell you, well, this is exactly what it is, so this was the best we could do with the information we had. And it at least told us that we're not falling 30 bushel behind. Same with the soybeans. Beans are actually where we are doing the best and being the most competitive. We're planting beans into cereal rye. We're spraying the rye sometime after planting, and maybe making a second post application if we have to, and then harvesting. And then that's it. We've cut out the seed treatment. We've cut out the fungicide. We're not putting fertilizer on ahead of beans. So we get very profitable when it comes to beans. And that's the revenue chart then. Beans are to me a no-brainer. They can take a lot of crap. They can take reduced stands. They can take the cold. They can take being planted into rye. We were talking at lunch, no-till planter, you know. Well, there really isn't such a thing. Yeah, I've jazzed my planter up kind of like what Rick showed you his is, but it's not necessary, and I didn't do that from the start. We've been no-tilling beans since 15, and just recently have put some of them fun attachments on. It's nice to have, it's not necessary to have. You can get it done. So some long-term trial results that we've been doing. We've been studying population. You would be led to think that no-till, you better put some extra seeds out there, you know, in case we lose some stand. We've been running strips at 100,000 versus 140, and that's in 30-inch rows. And on a 4-year average, that 140,000 is only getting us 3/4 of a bushel, if you want to even call that a result. So we started cutting back even more from the 140. Now, standard practice is going to be somewhere in that 120 to 130. But it just goes to show that just because you're no-till and cover crop doesn't mean you got to put out a bunch of extra seed. We've been running strip till trials I don't own a strip till bar, so when I gotta pay somebody 25 bucks an acre to do it, I wanna make sure it's paying. Strip till is, to me, more of an insurance that you can probably get out there planting when you want to with your neighbor. Over all the years and all the checks that we've been doing this, I'm only coming up with a 3 bushel advantage. So the best advantage to that strip I found was 9 bushel, and then sometimes it's not even paying. So I'm not real excited about the strip till. Like I said, it's a good insurance if you want to. You might think it would dry your soil out, but the wet spots in your farm are still wet, so it doesn't matter. Soybean treatment. 3 years, 8 different trials across them 3 years. Not really paying for the treatment. It will at $15 and $14 beans, but not at $8. Because we were talking at lunch with Rick, he said, well, if you're planting early, maybe you want that treatment. And I said, it hasn't mattered to us. So do your trials. Fungicide. I didn't do a lot of fungicide trials on corn and beans because I didn't want to use it, so I just quit using it. The few we did, we got 0 advantage out of the corn in 2020. 8 bushel and 0 bushel and 16 on corn, and beans was 0 as well. I do use it on oats because of rust. I need to start leaving some strips to see if I can quit using it, because I'd really like to, if I can, when oats can be kind of finicky, and I guess that's the one that still scares me yet, so I keep using it for that. Nitrogen, we're running a pre-citrus nitrate test. I don't know how much faith to put into it, so we always put in blocks of high and low checks off of what that test is telling me. This last year was the first time that we probably shorted ourselves a little bit, but prior to that, the test had been helpful in kind of giving us a guide where to go. We're somewhere in that 140 to 150 pounds of N is what we're targeting, and then we're using that test as to where to place it. In-furrow fertilizer, pop-up. Do your checks. There's places that you probably need it. I've ran into people that say, I have high pH soils, or whatever it is, where it is paying for them to use it. It wasn't paying for us. It was a really good selling point for the co-op or the fertilizer guy to say, well, you can put zinc in furrow, and you can put these micros, and look at all these other additives you can put in. At one point in time, we were up to like a $50 or $60 in furrow bill with all the goodies, and getting 2-3 bushel out of it, if that. So we quit, and we pulled them tubes out of the in-furrow, and now we put the nitrogen, some nitrogen on with the planter. We're dribbling it off the back. That's been probably one of the best moves we've made. And the extras aren't paying. So before cover crop and when we were still doing some tillage, the foliars, all the extra stuff that you can spray and put on your crop was getting us some benefit, and now with the system we're in now, a lot of those things don't pay. I still try a few products once in a while just to prove to myself that it wasn't a good idea, and so do your homework. Try to save yourself money if you can. Interseeding a cover crop. Timing is really critical. I got listed out the GDUs that we accumulate, and I like going into the standing crop, whether it's with my machine or plain, because I like that cover crop to have a head start. That head start in the fall makes a head start in the spring. If you can't get it done, then you got to go after harvest. And not that that doesn't work, I just like when that cover crop is up and growing, and it's going to give me the most spring growth come springtime. Getting it done. There's always an excuse why you can't get cover crop on. And I put this slide up because there's a lot of different ways to do it. And if you want to, you'll get it done. Like this poor guy here, he dug a drill out of the corner of his shed and froze his ass off drilling in rye because he really wanted it in that year. So it's just a matter of doing it. Spread it with the fertilizer spreader. VT it in, plain. Down by us we have a lot of hogs, and I always get the excuse, well, I have hog manure. I can't do cover crops with hog manure. Yes, you can, you just got to change the style of your injectors. Those two pictures, the tank, and then on the left of the tank is after he's applied it. That's the guy we farm with, and he's no-tilling back into that. His injectors are set on 30 inches, but he doesn't try to hit that strip. He just says, well, if I do, I do, and if I don't, I don't, because he's not using real high-tech guidance for applying that manure. So manure, at least hog manure, can be done easily with the cover crop. This was by accident. In 2016, I coincidentally took a picture of the field each month. So you can see how it started off in April, kind of a thin little stand. 20th of May, we're planting beans into that. 20th of June, that's what it looked like after it was burnt down and dying. And then in July. I really like rye, planting beans into rye. Have multiple plans and be flexible. Like Rick said, all the way through the alphabet, down to capital letters. This isn't, cover crop and no-till isn't a we sit down in January, make our plan, and that's it. That's how we do it. You know, we're spraying this chemical, we're doing this process, and nothing changes, right? That's the conventional way. You gotta have different plans. Think about different options for getting the seeding done. If it's too windy and you can't fly, then you can go by ground. If it's too wet, or you couldn't get it on before harvest, you go after harvest. If you didn't get anything done this last fall and you're sitting here today and you say, God, I want to try something, go frost seeding. You put rye on in March as the snow's melting, and if we have a nice spring, you'll get something to grow, and it'll at least get your feet wet doing it. The chemical plans, I still use chemical yet. So what I do is I go sit down with the retailer and I pick out a variety of things that I may need to use so I can get the best winter price. And then when it comes time to the growing season, I'm using what I need to. So if there's a weed that I need to target or a chemical I think I need to use, I'm using it. I'm trying not to use the chemical just because I bought it, and I'll return what I can. So that's where I say have lots of plans and options so you can be flexible. If you've been doing cover crop for a while, maybe you want to start cutting back on residuals. Maybe you want to try this V4 seeding. The V4 seeding, I don't like seeing people start on because that's something that you really need to balance chemical and seed establishment at the same time, and that one's tough to do. So don't start with that one or you're going to have a possible mess and get a bad taste in your mouth for the cover cropping. Roller crimp and rye. Try that after you've gotten comfortable with the cover crop itself. You know, get yourself okay with planting green first and then move on to crimping. And cutting back on fertilizer. You don't have to do it right away, but try to do it as you're getting into it and going through this process. That's the only way we're going to start making ourselves more profitable. Why I want to keep cover cropping. I always say I've traded one set of problems for another. It's not a silver bullet. It's not the easiest thing in the world. I still have problems, but I get to have more fun doing it. It's added a lot more thought, management, and excitement back into farming. Farming conventionally got to be so mundane that we dig, we plant, we spray, we harvest, we rip, and we do it all again. And now with the cover crop and the no-till, it's added some more management and thought to it that you need to actually be thinking about things and doing stuff. No-till beans has been our most profitable change in the rye. The corn has been challenging. We're figuring that out. If you're already no-tilling corn, adding the cover crop is easy. To me, the hardest part has been being patient planting corn and making the timing right than adding the cover. I've had more problems with screwing up planting than I have with the cover affecting the corn. I kind of went over a lot of different stuff. Does anybody have any questions on all of that? I have a lot of things I didn't cover. I've tried a lot of stuff. I'm an open book if you want. Yeah.
Just off the top of my head, both you and Rick talked about like pushing the corn planting date back a little later in spring, take advantage of timing and stuff, and soil temperature and all that. Do you find that you planted an earlier maturing variety of corn then to adjust for that?
I haven't. We are planting 102 to 105 day corn yet.
Sure.
What's got me believing that I can push that plant date back and not be penalized is this last year, I tried some non-treated corn seed. Most of our corn seed is treated, and I wanted to try some untreated seed, and that sticking that non-treated seed in that cold soil didn't work, and so I had to replant. And I replanted corn, a 95-day corn, on the 26th of May, and that corn did just as well as the corn next to it planted April 28th or something. I've had the conversation with an agronomist about, hey, if I'm going to push this planting back, should I shorten hybrids? He didn't think we needed to, you know, because that 102.5 isn't real late compared to what some people are doing. Yeah. The interesting thing you'll see with no-tilling corn or beans is they have a rough, ugly start. If you're in it for the beauty contest, then this isn't for you, because as no-till beans and no-till corn, they don't look good until about the middle of July. And in middle of July, now your neighbors start saying, well, that's a nice looking field of beans. And until then, it's tough to look at. Right, yes. You'll find that it's more of a marathon with the no-till than a sprint. And that was really apparent this fall, that the guys doing tillage, their corn was dying and drying. You know, 1st of October, I had guys telling me they were picking dry corn, and we didn't. I mean, that plant was green top to bottom yet. So that stuff is fun to see when you can hang on to that plant health. Yeah.
You mentioned starter fertilizer, didn't you didn't say a rate, then you mentioned 100 pounds N on
Yep.
corn.
Yep.
Okay, do you side dress your corn at roughly the end of June there, or very early July, put on a side dress of maybe 30 pounds? Do you do that or not?
So
In that rye with the corn?
Yep, the in-furrow fertilizer was around 5 gallons, I think, when we were doing that.
How did you just knife it in, or how did you put it in, or what's the two of you?
The plant. So in furrow. No, in furrow. Yep. Now that we're not doing the in furrow, we're putting 10 gallons and sometimes as much as 20 gallons of 32% of the back of the planter. That's where we start with nitrogen, and then we are coming back with a side dress in June. Yep.
Okay, so what are you using to put that? You got the rye in the middle of the road, right?
Yeah, the rye scattered all over.
How are you dealing with that rye when you're trying to put that in now, that 32%?
It's on the planter. It's just getting dribbled on
You
top.
already got the corn up this tall.
Oh, I've done Y drops with hire somebody to come in with the dropping it next to the row, and I've also hired people to come in with the coulter carts and stream in the 32% cart, like you've seen the single disc openers.
Double disc and trying to use an ammonia, the double disc ones that fold up underneath your tall boy, highway.
Yep.
Okay. You got folded up double discers, and then you just come down you got bins up there for your direct fertilizer. How you cut the cost down there? Anybody pull that stuff out yet?
I haven't. I know
That's
some.
something that somebody should do.
Yeah.
I side dress
You put the double disc over.
I take the row units off the planter, I'll do another pass.
Yeah, but that's not what the code is as well.
So you're saying they're using the double disc to incorporate the fertilizer?
Well, get it down there, because you won't take what with the ride.
Yep, yep. And, okay, so on that note, you know, dealing with the rye, that's why I went to having that 32 on the planter, and then using some kind of incorporation or Y drop next to the row with that fertilizer, with that nitrogen, because a couple of the first years we were doing this, we were broadcasting liquid on top. And that liquid gets tied up in that bean stubble, it gets tied up in the rye, so that's where we went to putting it either on the row, next to the row, or in the ground. Yep.
I think a double disc opener is the thing that the guy needs to build on, and then just, the arms just come down just like this, as you go that way. And then you just go with the double disc opener and put your dry on the
Nutrient management with cover crops is very important. Yes, it is. Yeah.
I just want to talk a little bit about your SWCD and why people choose that option usually, why people ask you to put it on, what confidence
Sure. So it's a sprayer that I take the tank off, and I take the boom off, and I put a dry seed tank on, and a second boom that's outfitted with hoses. So there's main lines coming off this tank that the air's blowing the seed out to a tower. If you're familiar with like the air seeders like the Canadians and people out west are using, it's going to a tower, and that tower it's getting diffused down per row. When I'm in standing corn, I got a 4-foot long tube I can clip on and get that seed down between the corn rows and closer to the ground. So some people like that versus the plain of just blowing it on top. In beans, I take that tube off and I'm just broadcasting over the top of the bean rows. I start applying around the 20th of August and run to the 15th, 20th of September. And the end date is more a matter of the crop maturity. You know, you're not going to be, I'm not going to go in somebody's field that the beans are close to harvest, because then you might as well wait till after harvest to get something incorporated. It's a tool to use, so why do people pick me? Well, some people have had a bad experience with the plane. I still think the plane does a great job, or can do a great job, and they're a tool to have. I still need to utilize the plane once in a while when I have wet falls. Drills are working well if there's drills in your area. Another thing that's people are helping them make the transition is the vertical till with seed incorporation, so that way you kind of scratch that tillage itch, but you got some seed growing at the same time. So there's a lot of ways to get it done. Seed mixes. You asked about that too. Rye in front of beans, and then if you're part of a soil and water or equip contract, you might throw in some turnips or radish or kale or whatever to help meet that multi-species requirement. Corn, I sell a lot of winter triticale that goes into beans in front of corn. The winter trit is slower breaking dormancy. It doesn't shoot up on you as fast in the spring if you do get a later spring. So the winter trit works really nice. We've played around with some annual ryegrass for the same reasons. It doesn't grow as big and as rapid. It has a hell of a root structure. And that one we haven't been able to successfully overwinter as well as your winter rye and winter trit. I was just telling Rick at lunch that I need to start putting more legumes in with what I'm doing, because I have that opportunity to start having vetch or red clover under the oats or something else. In the past, I've been too focused on putting a mix together that's good for grazing and not always necessarily good for the corn crop. It's not bad for the corn crop. I'm just missing out on some of those legumes by having too much grass in for the grazing. Any other questions? I'll stick around. So if you got something burning and want to visit after Rick's done, we'll visit it.